What up, Jay?
What up, Jay?
DJ J. Oh, we
Oh,
can't
you're
hear
muted,
you.
my man.
I was like, here we are, another crypto person with a DJ deck.
I mean, you don't have the lights on or the smoke machine going, so I feel like we're getting the
Yeah, I turned
early
it
morning
off because the producer said to turn it off.
What? That doesn't
Yeah.
sound like our producers.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
It really doesn't.
Or
Nice.
leave it for later.
There we go. Yeah, well, you can close this out with a set if you want to stick around. Nice. So Jay, you're the CMO of Echo Inc., which is a blockchain company building software that maximizes money's value. So you guys are the founding contributor to Echo Protocol, which is a protocol simplifying stablecoin usage, and builders of Bend, which is a free payments app that allows anyone to easily send money worldwide. So I was actually this morning reading the article you wrote about unlocking stablecoins' full potential, where you kind of framed the US dollar and the Chinese renminbi as technologies and financial innovations. And I think this idea that our current financial system isn't some like law of physics, but was actually just invented to solve problems that has existed over the last 100 years is actually just a really important thing for crypto founders to internalize. And I think now we just have a vastly more complex economies that demand more capable forms of money, like you mentioned. And I think, just so much kind of blue ocean there for crypto founders to play in. So wondering if you could kind of give us a quick overview on why stablecoins are the next big innovation in money, and maybe kind of grounded in some of the kind of money innovations of the past, if you can.
Sure. So I think the punchline might be pretty obvious for a lot of people that are watching, but I'll kind of unpack a little bit of what you were talking about with the blog post too. So for those that haven't read that, it was kind of like dissecting a little bit of history and going a little bit deeper on where we all came from. For me, I actually don't have a traditional finance background aside from kind of mulling over in the crypto space and learning about that through those means. And so I was actually at a DEX called AirSwap back in 2017, 16, that era. And during that time, just learning about DEXs, learning about kind of like the primitives or the things that preceded DEX is I guess if you think about it that way in terms of like HFTs, exchanges in the traditional finance sector, learning all that, all of a sudden it was really eye-opening because you see the concept of DEXs, you see the concept of blockchains, and then you have to go backwards. And so it felt really strange for me to really learn about something that was really kind of future-facing tech, but then go backwards and realize, okay, actually, we're actually living in reality. We're living in a world where DEXs aren't prevalent. I remember at that time, we were pushing like hundreds of thousands of volume, and that was pretty big in 2017. And so as I kind of rotated through that flow, I also read a bunch of books, and one of them was like called The Ascent of Money. It was this kind of like really shortened, kind of packed version of just history of money from like all the way to the beginning till now. And a lot of finance professionals and even crypto professionals at this stage recommend reading books like that to give the holistic picture. And so that kind of one anecdote from my past, and then just repeating that over and over and over as we kind of continue in the future, helped frame things a lot. And so when you actually look at the history of money, like you kind of alluded to, it was there to solve things that are very familiar. Fragmentation was a really big theme. Renminbi came together because there were all these different regions in China that use different types of currency, and there just needed to be one single source of truth. And that's what it was not as easy as I suppose I'm kind of describing, but it just kind of came to that kind of conclusion to some degree. Similarly, in the United States, there was the colonies, and the colonies were also transacting in like a barter system, and that was not that efficient. And so they needed basically something that wasn't volatile. And so you're seeing the same narratives repeat over. And so, yeah, sure, maybe there are different forks in the road that we take as people and as society, but for the most part, it actually at least tethers you to a good pathway to really understand how this all fits into place. And so just to kind of tie it back to crypto, you had protocol tokens. Those are incredibly difficult to use. There's thousands, tens of thousands now, even hundreds of thousands, probably if you really think about the total addressable market, and then you just need one transactable value. And I think I remember like the first time I came across a stable coin was DAI, I believe, and at least like as a user. And that was because to trade in ETH and WETH was incredibly difficult for the normal person beyond the walls of this call, probably. And so then $1 just made sense. And then that started to kind of bust its way forward. And of course, people can debate on ways they're decentralized or how they're secured and things like that. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking more on like the front facing, what does a stablecoin do? And I feel like it's just a hyper efficient dollar.
So obviously stablecoins have just exploded in narrative and attention and in the number of projects. And, there's stablecoin chains, there's, the various different issuers out there, and then just step up into the payment stack. So I'm curious if you could sort of help us position or understand where eco is trying to play in this, and how it becomes sort of a part of the critical piece of this infra stack.
Eco underpins most of the settlement layers, I would say, or at least complements it. It's not a replacement. So I think when you think about chains, they're saying, hey, our like L1 or L2 or like the bottom stack is the most important. So you should actually have an opinionation towards that. I most recently come from Avalanche. And so I was very much in the Avalanche kind of bubble, if you will. And one of the things that I think anyone can admit, or anyone should admit, is if you're stuck to one ecosystem, that's very much just you're long that ecosystem and almost nothing else. There is the crypto tribalism, which makes it much harder. And so I think from a personal perspective, I'm just always open for kind of a multi-chain view. Why? Because things can change literally every day, every month, every year. And so to just be stuck in one camp, I think is quite prohibitive. And so I think, I don't think this is necessarily why Eco takes this approach. I think they were pushing through this before I joined a year ago, but it kind of fits that model. It's where you can actually make it easy for any application, regardless of chain, regardless of infrastructure stack, to be able to accept stablecoins, regardless of asset type or network, is basically the pitch. And so I think that's most relevant now, because if you pick up an example, Base, for instance, has a few stablecoins. If it doesn't have other stablecoins beyond those few on chain, well, then you just X out that prospective audience group literally on day zero. You have no other chance. Of course, there are folks that use bridges, third-party apps, centralized exchange kind of routing and get creative with it, but that's not a realistic use case for like beyond the bubble of crypto. And so if I can actually create this middleware effectively that sits between the application and the user, it kind of reminds me of Plaid is what I use as an analogy often if I'm trying to like really distill down the description. When you see a Plaid as a consumer, you know that your bank account is accepted there. That is basically all you need to know. You don't even need to know exactly how it routes it, what APIs, SDKs they use. That's just what the value that it delivers. But at the end of the day, there is this ubiquitous kind of view at this point where if you see that logo, that's the emotion that it evokes. And so hopefully in some near-term future, that's what happens with Eco, where if you see the Eco logo within your application stack, you know that stablecoins accept there, and you can actually have, you could be rest assured that you're going to be able to use that application pretty seamlessly.
Got it. And how worried are you guys seeing, Stripe and, Robinhood and these big incumbents suddenly kind of enter the market? I guess Stripe is probably the most relevant one for what you guys are building.
Not really that worried, I would say. I think it's just like rising tides still lift all boats in this stage, in my opinion. Like $2-3 trillion is still not that large for an asset class. I used to feel very zero sum about things, especially when I first entered this industry. It's like, oh my God, this DEX is going to come. That's it. That's basically the thing that's going to take everything, and everything else is totally a wash. And that's obviously not the case. It actually opened up the doors for DEX aggregators, integrations, I guess like DEX as a middleware effectively. It also created ways to abstract away and simplify the accounts, abstract away and simplify the chains, all the infrastructure. And so there's different ways to attack that problem. And so I feel like with Stripe, I think Ryan, my CEO, said this recently on podcast too. It's like, now I don't have to actually explain what a stablecoin is, which is huge. Right. And before you had to go through that, before I even told you exactly what Eco was about. And so I think that's also kind of soft proof of why the rising tides all lift all boats thought is very salient.
Still so early.
Yeah, it's a meme, but like, come on. Like we've only been through like 2-3 cycles, and applications only became useful like the last cycle.
And I think to Josh's sort of opening question, like these tech shifts traditionally take a very long time to fully play out, right? We're sort of, thinking of, the formation of the first corporations, or even the, limited partnerships, et cetera. Like they come from nowhere in many cases and then become popularized, and then they just feel like they are here. And that sort of long nose of innovation is often much longer than most people are generally aware of. And so I guess maybe that leads to my last question here, which is, when we see these big shifts, especially in core technology or in money, financial services, there's usually a bunch of second order effects that happen based on that. So I'm curious, when you sort of look out into the future of stablecoins, what sort of new opportunities or second order effects do you see happening?
I'm going to kind of bias this towards marketing just because that's my kind of vertical that I know best. But I think in the beginning you had like something along the lines like, if we build it, they will come type mentality. And that's a very technological view of the world. But I think we all know that distribution and marketing as a wrapper that enables that distribution as one of the many parts is what really paves the way forward. The dominant group is really what establishes kind of that status quo, right? And so I think right now, because we're hyper connected and the internet, and there's all these different internet penetrated markets, and there's actually quite convoluted on exactly what that status quo globally looks like, I think there's going to be certain regions, certain kind of forward thinking kind of countries, if you will, or groups of people who are saying, hey, we're going to adopt this, and then it's going to start to become real. So this could take the form of corporations coming together. This could take the form of crypto startups coming together. This could take realistically a combination of the two, or maybe even powerful individuals and also governments as well. Like all these type of things contribute towards the direction. I'm thinking cat's out of the bag for stablecoins as an asset. I think it's like use cases feel right as well, although they're typically in the form of like some sort of pontification on like a podcast or like some sort of speech where you're saying, hey, bank the unbanked, types of things like that. But I mean, there's a reason why they become kind of popular narratives, is because there is some truth underpinning it. And now I think that that kind of theory is now becoming reality. And I'm excited to just see how people tend to use it. And I get to learn about, and I think we all do get to learn about these niche use cases that aren't necessarily popular. And like, I'm in New York. And so when I start learning about that, I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense. I can't really relate to it as an individual, but there's ways to actually enable that accelerated growth trajectory more with technology, marketing, and kind of go to market more broadly.
Have you seen a shift in the types of users or in the user behavior over the last few months as stablecoins have become much more popular?
On our side, not really, but also admittedly, we are still fairly like crypto centric in terms of our UX. You have to have a non-custodial wallet. You have to be able to connect that. So I think in that sense, it's still kind of the same, where it's like moving money around to get to that destination. There's also speculation on kind of farming points and airdrops and things like that. I think as the macro starts to improve and the industry starts to get kind of that mainstream spotlight, I feel like that net new user base is going to be interesting to watch. Like, what are our banking friends, our fintech friends going to be doing with this? Stablecoin sandwich as a term, which is basically using stablecoins to settle things in between, is something that I learned literally 2 days ago. And I knew that as a concept, but I didn't even know there was an actual term for it.
We like sandwiches.
Stablecoin sandwich. I love that.
Yeah. So things like that, I'm just keeping my eyes and ears peeled. And I feel like the only way to do that is just like, firmly be planted with some sort of opinion, hopefully with a product, so then you can actually sense and respond a little bit more easily.
Nice. Awesome, Jay. Appreciate you joining us, man. We'll excited to keep a pulse on the journey of Echo, and we'll bring you back on in a few months to catch us up.
Amazing. Now is my DJ set.
Now's your DJ set. Yeah. Play us out.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Peace, man.